All right, Kelly. And all of this coming as Chinese President Xi Jinping was giving his third 5-year term as president. Given his third term, President Xi had no issue securing every vote to continue his reign from the National People's Congress, whose members are appointed by the ruling party. It also comes as earlier this week, Xi accused the U.S. of trying to isolate China from the world and hold back its development. One Chinese official adding that the U.S. would face conflict and confrontation if it continues on this course. The move further reflecting the growing frustration in the Chinese Communist Party that its pursuit of global influence is being threatened by the United States. To say tensions are high is an understatement, a grave threat, according to one lawmaker. Joining us this morning is Jamil Jaffer, founder and executive director of the National Security Institute. Okay, so is there any doubt in your mind, certainly not in some lawmakers' mind, that China is the greatest threat to the U.S. right now?
Yeah, Marni, I think there's no question that's right. I mean, we saw the director of national intelligence say that just this week before the Senate Intelligence Committee. The 2023 threat assessment that your correspondents mentioned says exactly the same thing. And then you just saw the testimony yesterday before the House that also underlines that fact. China is absolutely the #1 threat to the United States going forward.
So the next obvious question is, what does the U.S. do about it? What are the options?
You know, it's a great question. Obviously, this is a long-term challenge that we face with China. The most immediate challenges that we may face come from their potential threats to Taiwan. We've seen now weeks and months of the Chinese flying fighter jets and bombers over that island that become increasingly belligerent in their tone towards Taiwan. That's probably the first flashpoint. We see all these long-term other things like the spy balloon, this rocket that burned up over Texas, but those are longer-term issues. The most immediate pressing issue is, one, does China get involved in the conflict with Russia and Ukraine? Do they start backing the Russians? And two, do they make a move against Taiwan as we and our allies are distracted looking at the Russia-Ukraine fight?
And of those two things, which do you think is more imminent? Because China has been ambiguous about Russia and a lot less so about Taiwan and their desires.
Yeah, you know, I think in a lot of ways, the potential for them to get involved in the Russia conflict is more imminent. It could happen tomorrow. It could happen next week, next month. It's unlikely they're going to go against Taiwan in the immediate next few weeks, months. But it's very possible it could happen in the immediate future. And so both of these threats are pretty near term. We just don't know when the Chinese will make a move against Taiwan. That's obviously the bigger concern, but probably Russia is more imminent from a timing perspective.
And what are the larger implications if China does supply Russia with the weapons it desires to continue the war?
Well, you know, obviously it draws China into the conflict as acting through a proxy in Russia there. But the bigger point is that it will cause the Ukrainians to face significantly more challenges because they can resupply the Russians with the kind of weaponry they need and the ammunition they need, which they're currently, starting to run out of and face challenges on. It'll cause us to pour more money and more effort into the fight and could cause a larger conflict if, in fact, things spill over.
Well, we had been reporting in the last week that China is bolstering its military spending by about 10%. Many thought it was in preparation at some point to take action in Taiwan, but might it also be in preparation to assist the Russians?
Could very well be. I think the longer term play for China is preparing for a long-standing conflict with the United States if and when that comes to pass. They're trying to create a deep water navy. They want to have a third more ships than we do in their navy. They're also tripling the size of their nuclear force by 2025, 2026. So that's obviously a major concern. So if they're able to make a move against Taiwan, that larger nuclear force, that larger navy could present a real challenge for us, particularly because, Marni, we don't have a lot of forward deployed forces, the kind of force at least that we would need to really face down China if it came to that in a conflict in the South China and East China Seas. They know that.
Right. And to that point, the U.S. is taking steps. The Pentagon has requested $15 billion to beef up military presence in the Pacific. What does that signal to you and the timing of this request?
Well, obviously, it demonstrates that we're making a commitment to the Indo-Pacific, but even that request is not nearly enough of what we would need if we were to actually go to war in an actual shooting war with China. And that's the challenge. It's hard. The question is, will having those forces there, or at least the commitment of funding for those forces, be enough to deter China? It doesn't appear to be enough right now at the present time. The Taiwanese need to, buy the stuff they need to defend themselves well, but we also need forward deployed forces if we're going to stand a chance of actually deterring Chinese action the way we talked about doing with Russia and weren't able to when it came to Ukraine.
A lot of people were paying attention when the U.S. shot down that spy balloon, and in the weeks following with some of the other aircraft that were shot down, unidentified still. Some lawmakers are raising concern that China could target U.S. infrastructure in some of this intelligence gathering. How likely is that threat?
Yeah, look, there's no doubt the Chinese are focused on American infrastructure, our nuclear infrastructure, our military infrastructure, but also our commercial and civilian infrastructure, because that's what you target if, in fact, you would end up getting into a conflict. So the Chinese are obviously actively collecting on us. The balloon is one part of that larger effort. They've long used spy satellites and the like, and they'll continue to do that. But there's no doubt that if the Chinese, if we got into some sort of conflict with the Chinese, targeting our infrastructure both through cyber and physical means is a key part of their war effort.
Jamil, Xi is accusing Washington of trying to hold back China's development and isolate China from the rest of the world. That's his accusation against the U.S. President Biden has said the U.S. needs to rely less on China, rely more on the United States in producing many of our own goods. Talk about the distinction in those two very different theories and statements.
Well, look, obviously President Xi has his own view of what the situation looks like, but the reality is that China is creating its own problems, its own situation. It's China that's being belligerent towards Taiwan. It's China that's suppressed democracy in Hong Kong. It's China that's interned 1 million Muslim Uyghurs in prison camps in the Xinjiang province, right? That's all Chinese behavior, and it's not something the U.S. made them do or is forced them to do at this time. They could pull back from that now. They could pull back from their own repression of their own people, the creation of a social credit system that's designed to punish people who don't toe the Communist Party line. That's all their behavior, not ours. Now, are we going to defend our allies and our partners in the region, whether that's Taiwan or Japan or Australia or India? Of course, we're going to do that. That's an important our role. The U.S. is a Pacific nation, even though China seems to not, pay that the due respect. And so the reality is that we will defend our interests and our allies around the globe, and that is what we are expected to do and what we will do.
Well, the American public certainly understands the threat that China poses. Every time they're polled, China is our greatest threat, but the relationship between these two global powers, important. Tensions have never been higher. Jamil, thank you for that, as always. Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.